All right, guys. So I'll start, as Daria mentioned. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to stop and ask me. It's an interactive session. We're talking about the softer areas of sales, so feel free to stop me and have a conversation and not a one-way lecture. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Igor. I'm head of sales here at DID. I'll say one sentence about DID and then we talk about professional things. So DID is a generative AI company. What we do is actually we create digital presenters, digital humans for multiple purposes like training, sales and marketing, customer service, and actually trying to have a human representation that can fulfill multiple human tasks on our behalf. And we're a major player in the generative AI revolution that's going on right now. We have a platform that combines both text creation and image creation and video creation all in one place. So that's that. If you want to learn more, I'm happy to discuss with any of you about that later on. So that's about the idea. Actually, this session could have been held by my avatar, which is my digital presenter, but I decided not to do it and to do it in person because we are talking about those exactly things that the avatar cannot really do, which is the human connection and the softer elements of sales. So it's actually all connected together, and we'll do that right now. So before we actually dive in, I wanted to say several things. So one is an assumption, which I think all of us can can start as a base. Selling is natural. Everyone are selling all the time. Every time you want, anyone wants to go for a dinner with friends and they want to push for their location or to go traveling or to pick a movie or anytime, we're always selling, and it's not something that is only relevant to our profession. It's relevant to anyone in the world, and we're selling all the time. And as sales professionals, we're also selling all the time, and every interaction that we have with our customers, our partners internally, eventually contributes to selling in this way or the other. And it's important to establish those two ground rules at the beginning. And therefore, what I want to talk about today is actually that mindset, and again, the softer areas come before technique. And what I want to talk about today is actually those areas of selling and not the actual sales techniques, which you all know probably a lot of. That's that. A little bit about myself. So I started from left to right. I started at the Israeli Air Force. I spent there 7 years flying drones. Very interesting and exciting profession I used to have. Afterwards, I started my sales career actually in the defense industry. I was selling, again, drones, airplanes, and defense systems to governments. So this was my beginning of selling. Actually, I actually sold very strategic deals to very big organizations, long processes. Very interesting time period. After that, I went to selling video platforms to telcos and service providers. Spent there 7 years at Kaltura and managed eventually the EMEA region. And then the sales processes were, again, big, complex, lengthy, and complicated. And now I'm working at DID and I'm selling AI platforms to any type of organizations, enterprises, and companies. So you can see that my career is diverse in terms of industries, but everything has to do with selling. And this is what actually brought me up to this session, because eventually I'm talking about the commonalities between selling different products to different industries, because eventually the sale remains the same. On a personal level, I have a wife and 2 kids, boy and a girl, and I am a not professional, but doing kite surfing for a very long time, pretty much since the beginning of this sport in Israel, 2002. So enjoying this hobby for a very long time. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about our current playground in the world today, again, to establish some baselines. So the first thing is that we're all experiencing the economic slowdown, and it's not a new thing to us. The business playground is changing. The main characteristics here that we see is that budgets are getting smaller and smaller, pretty much for everything. And for every sales process, we see more stakeholders, more decision makers. It's difficult to approve a sale with organizations because everyone are super meticulous about the budgets and about the spend and about everything in that area. And we see that ROI becoming much more important than added value. So it's not only about selling the value of the product, it's also about proving that the investment is lower than the return eventually on our products. And we have to understand that this is where we're living right now, and we need to change both our mindset and our pitches and our strategies and everything to do that. In parallel to that, we also see the post-COVID changes, I would say, which are mostly related to communication. This is what I want to focus about. So we see a big shift from face-to-face to video. Most of our sales calls today are video calls. It's something that at the beginning of COVID was very strange to everyone, I believe, but now it's the new common practice, jumping on a call and every different times of the day, doing shorter calls, video calls, and being more efficient. The attention span is going down all the time, regardless of COVID. As we bring more younger people into the industries, into the business, we see attention span is really reducing. So it's difficult to catch a person's attention. And again, here we see that efficiency overcomes entertainment. So people here want to be efficient. They don't necessarily want to go to dinners. They want to go to drinks with salespeople. They want to understand what are they selling, and they want to understand the ROI and move ahead. So everything becomes much more efficient, much more streamlined, which on the one hand is good for business, but it makes our job a little bit more difficult. And this is what we'll talk about here as well. Okay. Second, sorry. All right. Okay, so I want to talk about basics, and again, this session may be a bit basic, but I think it's super important for everyone to think a little bit about our profession from a different point of view, and think about really the basics of what we are doing as salespeople. So the first thing is again a notion I want to talk about is that we control the input and not the output. What does it mean? It means that eventually we cannot force anyone into buying anything in general. All we can do is we can give the inputs, we can do our part, we can plant the seed, and then we need to allow the customer or the person to actually make a decision. It's very important to keep this in mind and to remember it all the time, that when we are selling, we're not really closing the deal, we're setting the grounds for the customer to eventually accept. And as you all know, by managing pipelines and managing multiple opportunities, it's all about probabilities eventually. So as we do better in our sales process, we increase our probability of eventually making the customer say yes. But we're not really ourselves closing the deal. Eventually we are, but we need the customer to agree. So it's one thing I think it's super important, because everything we do it on our side. The second thing is that, again, I want to remind us all, people buy people, and it's still all personal. Although everything is more efficient, everything is more streamlined, eventually the decision itself is a personal, soft, emotional decision that someone needs to decide that they want to go ahead and either spend money out of their pocket or spend money of their company's pocket and to buy something that we want to sell. So those basics are super important, I think. And as you can see, the entire up until now, I'm talking about things which are more on the mindset side. So we need to remember those things when we conduct our activities as salespeople. A little bit psychology. I'll start here. And so the first thing is rationalization effect. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but if not, I'll explain it. And it's very simple. Eventually, in psychology, the decision-making happens in reverse to what we actually think it happens, which means that usually the person makes decision very quickly based on something we don't really know. Usually it's very natural and evolutionary elements that make them decide something in the beginning, and then everything they do after the decision is made is justifying and rationalizing their decision. So everyone thought heard about it, that people make decision on the first impression, and then the next 99% of the process, they're just rationalizing and making themselves feel good about the decision they already made in the past. So we need to remember this element. Now, when it comes to enterprise sales, to B2B sales, it's not so simple because not always when you jump on a sales call for the first time, the customer even know what is that you offer, so they cannot make decision immediately. So it's not 100% the same as with consumer buying, but it's something a little bit different. So it's like you see it's reversed. It's 2 and then it's 1. So he needs to understand that the need is being fulfilled. What is the value? What is the ROI? Very quickly, and the impression, the feeling, and the memory comes after it. So it's like a dance that we're dancing with the customer, where it's not just about the very first impression, but it's about the background of how they feel and how they react to us when we're establishing those understandings about the value and the ROI and the implication and the comparison to competitors and the price and all those things. But we need to keep this in mind. Eventually, the customer will decide on a natural psychological level much earlier than he got all the information. And then everything we do afterwards, it's ours to lose. It's not by mistake where people are saying it's ours to lose when it comes to sales, because we make the impression and then everything is just justifications. So that's psychology 101. This is the buyer's mental path, as I want to visualize it in a very clear way. So the first thing happens is that there is the first impression. This is where the seed is being planted immediately. The very first impression, and the impression is from everything. It's from the person who's speaking to the customer. It's from the company. It's from the setup. It's from everything. Then what happens is this rationalization that we just talked about. This rationalization is happening. Justification is happening right after. So the seed is being watered. Then we leave the conversation. We leave the call. And there is what happens after the call. The customer is coming out of the call with some kind of a memory and some kind of a feeling. So it's like the sun is shining on the plant, but it's not with us anymore, because it's out of our control. And the customer now is just sensing what he senses and making up his justifications and his feelings and so on. And then the customer is ready to buy. And those are the 4 steps that usually happens on a psychological level with the customer. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the sales process. So this is the sales process as we all know it, broken down to the steps that we are doing. So we're opening the door, we're creating the first call or the first interaction with the customer, we're qualifying the customer, we're making a discovery call, discovery meeting. We're making this connection with the customer, explaining him stuff, but also conveying our own personalities. We're convincing them eventually to buy. Then we're negotiating the price and the terms, and we're closing. Okay, this is where the line is actually being drawn here between the input and the output, as I mentioned. So everything we do in the first 4 elements will determine how well we'll be positioned at the last steps. If we are doing a phenomenal job at the beginning and connecting very well and convincing very well, then the negotiation would be much easier. We'll be on the upper hand where we start, because we know the customer wants, and we'll be able to close much quicker. So this is a representation of what I told you at the beginning, where everything is about the input and the outputs and not about the actual action of closing. Okay, so what is our goal? Our goal eventually is to close the deal. Very simple. But if I break it down to what I want the customer to do or to feel, so I want them to value us, to understand the value, and to really have a feeling of value. We want them to choose us over other vendors or partners, and we want them to trust us. So eventually, they want to decide, I'm trusting this vendor or this supplier, to go ahead and to pay them and to risk my position in the company and to go for paying and for selling. And that's it. Now, if I interpret it a little bit, so what's common here? It doesn't have anything to do with the ROI or with more analytical things. It's actually all about relationships, because if the person feels connected to the one who is speaking with, it's easier for him to value, it's easier for him to choose, and easier for him to create this feeling of trust. This is again an interpretation. There are multiple interpretations, but I'm focusing now on this. So this is my interpretation for this call. Now, so now we're here at the beginning. So what are we actually selling? So if you think about it, we all used to sell those things. We sell our product, we sell our solution, we sell our company. Those things are very important because the customer needs to know what they are buying and what they need and who will be eventually delivering those things to them. We're also selling this, we're selling the value, we're selling the revenue versus cost analysis, we're selling the ROI. Those things are important. Usually we're dancing between those things all the time when we are conducting sales calls and sales processes. But what actually I would argue we're selling is this thing here. We're selling ourselves. We're selling the connection, the personal connection that we have with this person. We're selling relationship, and we're selling eventually a feeling. Now, we're not selling it at the end. We're selling it through the process, because once the customer closed, they also want to have the product and they want to use it. And it's not all about relationship, but in order to get them to close and to decide, this is what we need to establish here. Okay, now this is the new, or I would say a very, very basic focus of what we do. So we are in the business of relationship building. We need to keep this in mind, because every sales call we're going in, we have an opportunity to build a relationship. And this is like 99% probability, because if relationship is built and it's strong, decision to buy is much, much easier, almost certain. So what we need to do? We need to listen with curiosity. This is very, very important. Now I'm talking about genuine things. Maybe I'll put it like this. Very, very authentic and genuine activities that we are, or behaviors that we are doing eventually in order to get this relationship built. So we need to listen. There's not a single sales lecture that people don't say listen to the customer. And still, most of us tend not to listen, because we tend to broadcast and to say and to think we need to go through the presentation and go through all the product features and all the company case studies and so on, and we're not really listening. So listen, but not just listen with curiosity, because if you are genuine about your interest in the other person, the person feels it, and this connection is actually formed. Communicate with passion, very, very, very important, because whenever you are passionate about the relationship or about the conversation with the customer, they feel it, and when they feel it, it sinks, and eventually it helps form the relationship. So be as passionate as possible, be exciting and memorable. Again, we want to make sure that when we leave the conversation, every conversation, the customer or the person we spoke with feels something. He feels first, he feels good about what the interaction that just happened. He feels that his time was well spent. He feels positive about the person he was speaking with. He feels that they can trust, they can believe us, and so on. And the last one, establish trust and openness. Trust is one thing. We need to always be perceived as trustworthy, but also be very open. What do I mean by open? So when we go into negotiations, we want the customer to feel comfortable going to us and asking us for a discount, and not just saying, okay, I'll not go with you because you're too expensive, I'll go with a competitor. This is why the relationship is very important, because it's not only about making them decide that they want to work with us, but also make them feel comfortable about discussing openly the process about how to get to the disclosure. So those are the main focus areas I think we need to focus when we talk about relationship-based selling. And I forgot the last one, which is this one. It's about positioning ourselves as experts and as consultants. Again, it's all all part of this softer understanding that we are forming a relationship. And if the person that we're speaking with feels that we are experts in what we do, and that we are actually their consultant, not just selling them in order to sell, then he feels this trust, he feels this openness, everything here is connected. Let's continue. So I want to separate two maybe ideas here, how we are preparing for sales process, for sales conversation, for sales call. Okay, so what we usually do is we do the business-oriented preparation. We learn about the company of the person that we're speaking with, about their current solution, about their competition. We're trying to do a business value kind of creation where we know what we're going to pitch them, the ROI analysis. Most of us are doing those things very, very professionally and very well. What we don't do usually is we don't do the preparation, which is relationship oriented. Why we don't do that? Because it's not something we prepare for every single call. It's something that's part of our mindset. And those are the things that we are not preparing for, but we are always need to be prepared for when we are living our life as salespeople. So those things are actually what really, really matters in sales conversations, in sales calls. It's our emotional qualities, but it's our general knowledge about how easy we can have a conversation, a sophisticated, interesting conversation with a person, how curious we are, how passionate we are, how flexible we are to understand where we need to take discussion towards, and how mindful we are to the customer itself. Now, what I would argue is that those things, the left ones, we need to do them ad hoc every time we have a conversation with a customer. It's important, it's part of our professionality. But those things we need to cultivate all the time. We need to always think about how we improve our emotional qualities, how we increase our knowledge in general, so we're becoming more interesting people, how curious we are, how well we are listening in general in our lives. And if we manage to do that, then every single call that we're jumping on, we are prepared. We are prepared to form a relationship. We are prepared to have an interesting and insightful conversation, and we're prepared to leave a memory and feeling from the customer. And this is the difference, I think, here. Now I want to talk to you about one technique, and this technique is actually connected. All rights reserved to Jordan Belfort, which is the Wolf of Wall Street, the actual Wolf of Wall Street. He created this technique. You probably saw it in the Wolf of Wall Street and in other materials that he is sending, and I want to use it to establish a bit more our discussion here. So this is the sale. The sale is a straight line between the start of the sale and the close. This is what we need to do anytime we're meeting a customer. Eventually, we're salespeople, we want to close. This is what we want to do. Now, what happens is that there are diversions from this straight line all the time. And what he mentioned here is in this technique is that there are only two purposes why we need to diverse from our straight line towards closing. One is to create rapport, to actually have the connection, the personal connection with the customer and the person that we're speaking with, and to gather information, gather intelligence. Those are the two areas. So imagine we have a conversation with a customer. We want to talk about the product. We want to understand how we want to close, what are the next steps, offer him the commercial proposition, negotiate with them, all those things. But if we have an opportunity to create a personal connection, this rapport we're talking about, we can diverse. We can talk about other things. We can talk about our kids and family, about our hobbies, about our sports, about the politics, about anything we want. Or if we want to, if the person starts talking about something which is interesting for us because it can help us with our negotiations going forward, with our understanding about how much he needs what we offer or not, we can also go ahead. So we can allow them to speak about anything personal to create a report, or anything professional about to gather information. But it's an important, I think, framework for us to think about it this way, because every single sales call and sales meeting is like that, when we are trying to make a close, but we're also creating those. What I would argue here is that we need to be very subtle and very sensitive about how we go back to the line, because I say here in this session that the conversation and the relationship we're building is more important than actually finishing everything you have to say about the product, or going through all the commercial proposal and so on. Because the calls are very, very short right now, I would say it's not about closing the call where all the information was conveyed, but it's more about most of the relationship building was done in a very quick time, and established the grounds for eventually creating a more meaningful conversation, a more meaningful relationship. So just keep this in mind as a technique. All right, let's talk a little bit about our limitations here. So we have several limitations we need to be aware of. First, that we're talking right now in this day and age about short video calls and really, really short time to make this connection. And what I would offer you as part of this discussion here is to focus not on how well you conveyed your product features and technical parameters, but more around how quickly you can establish this personal connection, and also obviously showed value. It's very important. If it's just personal connection, it's not enough. We need to have the value as well, so that decision is being made also and justified at the end. There is low attention, as I mentioned at the beginning. We need to be very, very mindful every single conversation and look and share something which is interesting with customers. Now, I don't think that the right thing to do is to have prepared interesting stories, because it's very artificial. I would say as part of our mindset, as part of our personality development, we need to be interesting enough so that we can come up with stories on the fly based on what the customer is saying. So it's looking for opportunities to interest them and not just saying something we think is interesting, but even something which is interesting and not related to the conversation is still good because it recreates this memory and it somehow brings attention back to us. This is important. Objections to buy, obviously, this is a very big limitations. We need to be very, very flexible and try to open their mind for the value. It's not about continuing talking about the same things, but really trying to shift the value from one to the other. It can be shifting from cost reductions to revenue generation to customer engagement or whatever you're selling in your industry. But think about how we eventually open their mind that there is actually maybe a value beyond what they already objecting to. Okay, and the fact that we don't have enough personal meetings, it's really a limitation for us. What I would say we need to do is we need to focus on how we create those offline personal connections, which means after the call, trying to shift to a WhatsApp or a SMS kind of communication with the customer, move away from emails and formal communication into something a bit more personal, a bit more close, have more phone calls and trying to have this connection offline, because we won't have the meeting probably in most of our sales engagements. But again, we do need to push for those engagements because those really close the deal. But sometimes that's just not possible. And too many decision makers, as I said at the beginning, we need to try to connect to all of them. It's easier to connect to them because you can be connected to 10 people over WhatsApp and not to meet all those 10 in 10 different locations all over the world. So think about it more as an opportunity and more as an advantage rather than the disadvantage. And try to connect with those decision makers and find your champion. We talk about champions. It's not this session is not about that. But if we have multiple decision makers, we need to identify the one who we have the best connection with, the best relationship with. He can give us information. He can be our champion. He can represent us, and he eventually can close the deal for us. So those are. Yes, please.
There's a question in the chat. Can you give an example for something interesting from one of your sales?
Yeah, actually, it's a good question, of course. We are now at DID, as I said at the beginning, we're offering digital presenters for training, for marketing, for customer service. We also have a side thing we do, which is generative AI, where we allow consumers to generate creative videos using our AI. So whenever I speak with people about their professional use case and their value and so on, and I feel that they're falling asleep, I always I am telling them something about what we do, which is outside of this conversation. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not selling them anything, but I can just say, you want to hear something cool? We just won product hunt last week, because what we did is we created the very first generative AI solution that combines the three technologies: the text generation, the image generation, and in the video. So this is just an example. It's cool, it's fun, and this can start a discussion around the long-term vision of where AI is going, whether or not it will replace creators and artists or not. So we can talk about it. It still leaves us in the area of talking about our company and not going away completely about talking about kite surfing, and still spark some interest in them, because it's not what they are looking for, but it's fun for them to know something like that. So it's just an example. Obviously, it can be anything. Ideally, the best interesting thing you can offer in this conversation would be related to what the customer said. This is why maybe it's a bit hard, but if you are well read, watched a lot of movies, talk to a lot of people, you have the knowledge. You can take it out whenever is needed when the customer is signaling something. But again, it's a bit difficult. You can always come prepared with a few interesting insights you can tell about your business, about your company, about their company, about anything. I hope it answers the question. Right. Can we continue? Or there are more?
No questions for now.
All right. Thanks. Okay, and we're almost at the actual questions slide. So in summary, I gave a lot of information here, maybe a little bit different and dispersed, but I would like to summarize. So I would argue again that it is still all personal, and that we're here to make friends, we're here to make relationships. Let's not forget it. We're sometimes forgetting it because we're so dwelled with a lot of opportunities, pipeline management, emails, efficiency, back-to-back meetings. But eventually our job is to sell, and the way to sell is to create this connection, this relationship, and to actually make friends. And I'm making it very, very soft and like funny. We're here to make friends. We're not here to form long-term, boring relationships. We're here to make friends, and we need to be this person people want to be friends with. If we are this person, if we feel like we are this person, we will be successful in this, and we will be able to form those relationships and to close those deals. The second thing is again, it's more about, not all about energy, but it's more about the energy and about our passion and about being memorable. Keep this in mind. It's better to come up from a sales call where you didn't cover your product or your features or your pricing, nothing, but you kept a very strong memory for this person that they want to speak with you again. They will talk about this call with their friends. This is what you want to achieve eventually, and we need to keep this in mind when we're having those calls, because we can come up from the call and we managed to go through all the slides, but we didn't create any memory, and we were not passionate, and the energy was not there, and we didn't get to where we wanted to be. And the last thing, that every interaction is an opportunity, and we need to be very attentive. So we need to listen to the customer and the people we're speaking with. Be very, very curious about this, genuinely curious when we go into a conversation, and then we can actually come up with the right thing that they said, and we understood that this is an opportunity for us to expand on to create a relationship with, on this basis, and so on. So think about it, about the fact that we want to create friends. We want to be energetic and passionate and memorable, and we want to be very attentive so that we can actually use the opportunity when it comes and establish this connection, which will eventually allow us to close the deal. So that's that from me.
I do have a question. We have a second?
Yeah, please.
So actually, I'm not coming from selling. I'm actually more of an AI guy. I was wondering, you mentioned the state of mind and everything, but do we have proofs, measurable proofs of those, the efficiency of those? Some are common sense, but still, you know, many times I hear that you need to listen to the customers and everything, but I do see many sales persons that just, you know, bombing you with information and trying to confuse you and other things. And I was wondering about the efficiency of those different methods, and I see the advantage of listening, right? It's more ethical anyway, but in the perspective of efficiency, what if there is something more?
So I cannot. Yeah, thank you for that. It's a good point. Again, it raises the big question whether or not soft skills in general can be scientific or they're not. But I would say that the best, I don't have a scientific proof, but I think that the best proof that we have is results. So I'm doing this for more than 10 years now. Both myself, I did many sales processes and closed many deals, and same thing for people who reported to me. So I saw hundreds of deals being closed and being worked on, and I see just a clear view here that people who are forming those connections, people who are more listening, are eventually closing deals better, and not only closing more, also closing them better on better terms, because they're coming to negotiations in a much better position because they are friends with this person, so they can be open and communicative with those people. They can understand what are the boundaries, and they can close eventually better. So I for a person see this really proves itself in the field. So this is maybe the best proof I can give. And I didn't see a lot of sales calls that went in a very technical way where people really gave all the information that they wanted to give, but there was no connection, and the customer was just in listening mode, and that's it. And then eventually they close. Those things happen. If the customer comes in advance, they know they want to buy, and that's it. Those things come. Those things happen. But if this is the case, you don't need to spill out all your information. You can just understand this much earlier in your discovery, and then close the deal much quicker. So this is what I would say.
There is a comment in the chat that it all depends on the size of the deal.
Okay, it's a good comment. It's a good comment. My personal experience was both with very large deals. I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars worth deals and also smaller deals. And I would say that as the deal is bigger and more are at stake, I would argue those things are even more important, because if you have now a process of 1 year or 2 years with multiple people and you want to close a very big deal, you need, if you have those connections of the ships and you create those champions within those companies and you have close connection to many people, your chances of winning and of getting the best deal possible are just much higher. On smaller deals, also the same thing. It just all happens much quicker. Obviously, if someone is buying something very cheap and they can approve it themselves and it's very easy, then the process is just all much quicker. It's accelerated. They can decide in 1 minute or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but the basics are still apply. They still apply the same.
Any other questions? No. Okay,
All right.
so
I'll leave you with this last scene that I want you to see.
yeah, and I'll just say that if anyone has questions after this session, you can send it to us through our website, and we'll make sure to send them to Igor and answer everything you ask.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss this. It's a topic I feel very close to, so I'm happy to discuss with anyone that wants to talk later.
I think it's a great way to finish. So thank you very much, Igor, and thank you everyone for participating. Hope to see you at our next events.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.